Looks like we've got some interesting research about public investment in education.
Yeah, looks like it.
We've got this in-depth report from the Washington Center for Equitable Growth,
Okay.
and then another report from the Education Law Center, and this one's focusing specifically on Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
We're going to kind of dig into this idea of education as an investment, not just for the kids, but for, society as a whole.
Yeah.
What sparked your interest in this one?
Well, I think it's really fascinating to see how consistent the message is across these two reports.
Okay.
Even though they're focused on different areas.
Yeah.
They both really suggest that the return on investment in education, it extends way beyond the classroom.
Okay, so both reports really emphasize this idea of education being an investment,
Yeah.
not just spending. I'm curious to see how they back that up.
Well, one of the things they do is they challenge this common perception of education as a cost center. It's easy to think of it that way, but when you look at the data, it's clear that education generates significant returns.
Yeah, it's like planting a tree.
Yeah.
You need to put in the time and resources up front.
Yeah.
But, eventually you get something much bigger and more valuable in return.
Exactly. And these reports show that the benefits of education go way beyond just boosting GDP.
Okay.
They impact everything from employment to crime rates to even our health.
Wow. Okay, let's start with employment then. The Washington report says high school dropouts are twice as likely to be unemployed.
Yeah,
That's a pretty stark statistic.
it is. And it really highlights the potential of education to kind of break these cycles of poverty and dependence on public assistance.
Right.
The Pennsylvania report actually quantifies this. They state that if every single mother in the U.S. had a high school diploma, we could save something like between $1.5 and $3.5 billion each year in public assistance.
Wow. That's a massive amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you think about the ripple effect on families and communities.
Absolutely. This is just one example of how investing in education can have a positive impact on the economy, and on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the connection between education and crime. I was surprised to see that the Pennsylvania report found 41% of prisoners are high school dropouts.
That's a really sobering statistic.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, are we neglecting education and ending up paying later
Yeah,
in the form of higher crime rates and incarceration costs?
right.
The report points out that we spend over 3 times more to incarcerate someone than to educate them.
That's mind-blowing.
Mhm.
It really makes you question our priorities as a society.
Yeah,
The cost of education seems like a bargain
right.
compared to the cost of, dealing with the consequences of not investing in it.
And we haven't even touched on the social costs, the lost potential of those incarcerated individuals.
Okay, here's something I found super interesting. The impact of education on health.
Okay.
It seems counterintuitive, but the data is pretty clear.
It's almost like education is this magic pill for society.
Right.
The Washington report points out that education leads to healthier choices,
Okay.
which in turn reduces reliance on these public health programs and even lowers mortality rates.
I know. There's this incredible statistic in there that for each additional year of education a person has, their risk of death decreases by 3.6%.
It's remarkable. It seems like education equips people with the knowledge and tools to make healthier choices throughout their lives, leading to longer and more fulfilling lives.
Yeah. The Pennsylvania report goes into the cost differences for public health insurance. It's startling. The average high school dropout consumes about $2,700 per year in public health insurance costs. Compare that to a high school graduate who consumes $1,000 per year and a college graduate only $170.
Yes, and think about the long-term savings on healthcare costs.
Right.
It's a win for individuals and for the government. So we see that education plays a role in individuals' financial well-being, but it also has a significant impact on the larger healthcare system.
Both reports also talked about how education leads to more informed and active citizens, which is, obviously crucial for a healthy democracy. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Well, the Washington report, they tie this idea back to the founders' views on education.
Okay.
They saw it as essential for personal advancement, of course,
Right.
but also for the very functioning of a free and self-governing society.
So a well-educated population is more likely to vote, volunteer, participate in their communities, and, hold their leaders accountable. It's really creating a more engaged and informed citizenry.
Exactly. And that leads to this concept of social capital,
Okay.
which both reports emphasize. Social capital is essentially the networks of relationships and trust that exist within a society.
Right.
Education helps to build social capital, which, benefits everyone.
And that ties into what the Washington report calls out about educational disparities fueling inequality.
Right.
Investing in disadvantaged communities isn't just about individual success. It's about, building a more just and equitable society.
Right. The research highlighted in the report shows a clear link between achievement gaps and things like income inequality and persistent social problems.
Yeah.
Addressing those disparities in education is key to creating a more level playing field.
And speaking of disparities, the Pennsylvania report talks about these massive funding gaps that exist between school districts,
Right.
creating what they call a cycle of inequality that's difficult to break.
That's a crucial point. The report highlights some shocking figures about the difference in per-pupil spending between wealthy and poor districts.
Yeah.
In some cases, one district might spend almost double what another district spends per student.
For example, they pointed out that in 2009-2010, Valley View spent just under $9,000 per student, while Lower Merion spent over $23,000.
It is.
That's an enormous difference.
And if you think about a classroom of 25 students,
Right.
that translates to a difference of over $350,000 per year. It's a stark illustration of how resource allocation can perpetuate inequality in education.
So we're seeing that these funding gaps have real consequences for students in disadvantaged communities. It begs the question, how do we ensure that every child, regardless of their zip code, has access to a quality education?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that both of these reports grapple with.
Yeah.
There's no easy solution,
Right.
but they do offer some insights into potential strategies
Okay.
for creating a more equitable education system.
So what are some of those strategies? What do the reports suggest?
Well, one common thread is this idea of shifting our focus from simply measuring inputs like per pupil spending to really understanding the outcomes we're aiming for,
Right.
What does it mean to have a high-quality education?
Yeah.
In the 21st century,
Right.
It's not just about test scores anymore.
Right. Both reports seem to emphasize that it's about equipping students with skills like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, adaptability,
Exactly.
the kind of skills they'll need to thrive in a world that's changing faster than ever before.
And the Pennsylvania report makes this interesting point about the transmission of knowledge,
Okay.
suggesting that schools should focus on teaching kids what adults in their community already know,
Okay.
connecting education to real-world skills and knowledge.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes education feel more relevant and applicable to students' lives, especially if they can see how it connects to their own communities. And it ties back to that idea of civic engagement we were discussing earlier.
Absolutely.
Preparing students to be active and informed citizens.
And speaking of preparing students, both reports really highlight the importance of early childhood education as a critical investment.
Yeah, the Washington report dove deep into the benefits of high-quality pre-K programs. And the numbers were pretty impressive. They found that for every dollar invested in these programs, the return could be anywhere from $2.63 to a whopping $17.07.
Those are some serious returns, and the benefits go way beyond academics.
Yeah.
Research shows that kids who participate in these programs are more likely to have better health outcomes,
Okay.
higher employment rates, and even lower rates of criminal activity later in life.
It's almost like investing in early childhood education has this ripple effect that touches every aspect of a person's life,
Yes.
from their health and well-being
Yes.
to their economic prospects and their contributions to society.
Precisely. It's an investment that pays off in spades, not just for the individual, but for society as a whole.
Right.
And it can be especially impactful in breaking those cycles of poverty and disadvantage that we were discussing earlier.
It seems like a no-brainer, right? Giving every child a strong start in life through quality early childhood education could have profound implications
Yeah,
for their future and for the future of our communities.
I agree. It's an investment worth making. And along with investing in early childhood, both reports emphasize the critical role that teachers play
Yes.
in a child's educational journey.
They really drove home the point that teachers can make a world of difference. And it's not just about having warm bodies in the classroom. It's about attracting and retaining high-quality educators who are passionate about their work,
Absolutely.
committed to their students' success.
The research is very clear on that point.
Yeah.
Effective teachers are the single most important factor in student learning.
Right.
And as the Pennsylvania report points out,
Yeah.
that often comes down to providing adequate funding and resources,
Right.
as well as creating supportive working conditions where teachers feel valued and respected.
Right. It's about investing in our teachers, not just in terms of salary, but also in terms of professional development opportunities, creating a school environment where they can thrive and do their best work.
Exactly. And that ties into those broader social and economic factors
Right.
that both reports highlighted as having a huge impact on educational outcomes. We can't just focus on what happens inside the school walls.
Right.
We need to address issues like poverty, access to health care, even things like neighborhood safety if we want to create a truly equitable education system.
So it's about taking a more holistic approach, recognizing that a child's success in school is influenced by so many factors outside of the classroom. And that means we need to think about solutions that extend beyond just education policy.
Right.
We need to consider social policy, economic policy, even healthcare policy.
You're hitting on a really crucial point. It's about understanding that education doesn't exist in a vacuum. To create lasting change, we need to create a supportive ecosystem for children to thrive, both inside and outside the classroom.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the challenges and potential solutions, but I'm curious to dig a bit deeper into the specific policy recommendations
Okay.
outlined in the Washington report. What were some of the key takeaways there?
Well, one of the main things the report advocates for is a significant increase in public investment, particularly at the federal level.
Okay.
And they're not just talking about throwing money at the problem.
Right.
They're proposing strategic investments
Okay.
in specific areas like school infrastructure, early childhood education, and K-12 education services.
And their analysis suggests that these investments would generate significant economic and social returns, exceeding the costs by a substantial margin. It's not just about doing the right thing. It's about making a smart investment that benefits everyone.
Exactly. And they go on to break down some of the potential benefits of these investments. For example, they estimate that a $50 billion annual investment in school facilities over 12 years would lead to a 3.27 to 1 return on investment in terms of increased GDP, not to mention the creation of nearly 600,000 jobs in just the first 2 years.
Wow, those are some pretty compelling numbers. It really paints a picture of how investing in education can stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and improve the quality of life for everyone.
Right, and it's not just about economic benefits. The report also emphasizes the role of these investments in reducing income inequality, expanding access to opportunity, and creating a more just and equitable society.
So it's about investing in human potential, empowering individuals to reach their full potential and contribute to society in meaningful ways. And it seems like the Pennsylvania report echoes those sentiments, emphasizing the power of public education as an engine for social and economic progress.
Absolutely. That report makes a strong case for public education as a fundamental right,
Okay.
essential for a thriving democracy and a prosperous society. They point to a wealth of research demonstrating the benefits of education,
Right.
from increased employment rates and higher earnings to reduced crime rates, improved health outcomes, and greater civic engagement.
It's a powerful reminder that education isn't just about individual achievement.
Yeah.
It's about creating a better future for everyone.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that education doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
The Pennsylvania report underscores the importance of addressing issues like poverty, healthcare access, and early childhood development if we truly want to create a more equitable and effective education system.
Right. It's about creating a supportive environment, both inside and outside the classroom, where all children have the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things I found particularly compelling about the Pennsylvania report was their discussion of some of the criticisms and challenges that public education faces.
Okay.
They don't shy away from addressing some of the tough questions, which makes their arguments all the more convincing.
I agree. They tackle some of those common criticisms head on, like the arguments that public schools are failing to adequately prepare students for the workforce, or that they're too bureaucratic and inefficient.
Exactly. And they offer thoughtful rebuttals, pointing to research that counters those claims, highlighting the complexities of the issue.
Right.
For example, they acknowledge that there is a need for greater accountability and a focus on skills relevant to the 21st century workforce. But they also argue that simply emphasizing standardized testing and narrowing the curriculum isn't the answer.
Right. It's about finding a balance between rigor and relevance. between preparing students for the workforce and fostering their creativity, critical thinking, and love of learning.
Precisely. And they also address the criticisms about funding and resource allocation, acknowledging the disparities that exist, and advocating for more equitable funding formulas that prioritize the needs of disadvantaged students.
So they're not just defending the status quo, they're acknowledging the areas where improvement is needed
Right.
and proposing solutions that address those challenges head on.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes their report so compelling. They present a balanced and nuanced perspective, acknowledging both the strengths and weaknesses of the public education system, while ultimately making a strong case for its vital role in a just and thriving society.
So we've heard a lot about the benefits of investing in education, but I'm curious to dig a bit deeper into the actual research findings presented in these reports.
Okay.
Let's start with the economic benefits. What kind of evidence did they present to support their claims?
Well, both reports presented a wealth of data demonstrating the positive correlation between education and economic well-being, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Okay.
For example, the Pennsylvania report highlighted the strong link between educational attainment and employment rates,
Okay.
pointing out that high school dropouts are more than twice as likely to be unemployed compared to college graduates.
Wow.
And they emphasized that this disparity becomes even more pronounced during economic downturns.
So education acts as a kind of buffer against unemployment,
Yeah.
particularly during tough economic times. That makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider that higher levels of education often equip individuals with more in-demand skills and knowledge.
Exactly. And the Washington report delved even deeper into the impact of education on earnings, finding that those with higher levels of education consistently earn more over their lifetimes. In fact, they estimated that the average college graduate earns a whopping 67% more than the average high school graduate over their lifetime.
Wow, that's a massive difference in earning potential. It really highlights the economic value of investing in education, both for individuals and for the economy as a whole.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individual income.
Right.
The Washington report emphasizes that a more educated workforce leads to greater economic productivity,
Okay.
innovation, and overall economic growth. They argue that investing in education isn't just an individual benefit.
Right.
It's an investment in our nation's economic future.
Right. It's about creating a virtuous cycle where education fuels economic growth,
Sure.
which in turn creates more opportunities for individuals to improve their lives and contribute to society. And both reports seem to highlight the potential cost savings associated with a more educated population,
Yeah,
particularly in terms of social safety net programs.
that's a really important point. For example, the Pennsylvania report estimated that if we could help all single mothers graduate from high school,
Right.
we could save somewhere between $1.5 and $3.5 billion annually in public assistance costs.
That's a massive amount of money.
Mm.
It really highlights the potential for education to reduce dependence on government assistance and empower individuals to achieve financial independence.
Absolutely. And the Washington report cited research suggesting that investing in high-quality early childhood education can generate even greater long-term cost savings
Okay.
in areas like healthcare, criminal justice, and special education. They found that these early interventions can lead to significant reductions in future costs
All right.
by preventing problems before they arise.
So it's not just about helping individuals reach their full potential.
Yeah.
It's about making a smart investment
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately benefits everyone by creating a more productive, healthy, and equitable society. And speaking of creating a healthier society, let's shift gears and delve into the research findings related to the impact of education on health outcomes. What did the reports have to say about that?
Well, both reports highlighted a wealth of evidence demonstrating the positive correlation between education and health, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Okay.
It seems pretty clear that education has a profound impact on overall well-being, even impacting things like life expectancy.
Well, both reports highlighted a wealth of evidence demonstrating the positive correlation between education and health, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
That's right. The Washington report, in particular, dug into the link between education and longevity,
Okay.
finding that those with higher levels of education tend to live longer, healthier lives. They even cited a study that found that each additional year of education reduces the risk of death in the next decade by 3.6%.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. It suggests that education equips individuals with the knowledge and skills they need to make healthier choices, navigate the healthcare system more effectively, and ultimately live longer, more fulfilling lives.
Exactly. And it's not just about living longer, it's about living better.
Yeah.
The Pennsylvania report explored the impact of education on specific health behaviors,
Okay.
finding that those with higher levels of education are more likely to engage in healthy habits like exercising regularly, eating a balanced diet, and avoiding smoking.
So education seems to play a significant role in promoting preventative health care and empowering individuals to take control of their own health and well-being. And that, in turn, can lead to reduced healthcare costs, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
You got it. Both reports highlighted the potential cost savings associated with a healthier, more educated population. For example, the Pennsylvania report pointed out that the average high school dropout consumes $2,700 in public health insurance costs per year, compared to just $1,000 for the average high school graduate and a mere $170 for the average college graduate.
Those are significant differences. And when you multiply those cost savings by the millions of individuals who could benefit from higher levels of education, you start to see the potential for a real impact on the healthcare system as a whole.
Absolutely. And the Washington report took it a step further, estimating that if every high school dropout in 2004 had graduated, the savings in public health costs over their lifetimes would have been a staggering $41.8 billion.
That's an incredible amount of money. It really underscores the economic value of investing in education as a way to improve health outcomes and reduce healthcare costs.
I agree. It's a powerful argument for prioritizing education as a key component of any strategy for creating a healthier, more prosperous society.
Now, let's turn our attention to the research findings related to the impact of education on civic engagement. What did the reports have to say about that?
Well, both reports highlighted the strong positive correlation between education and civic participation, including activities like voting, volunteering, and engaging in community activities. They argued that education plays a vital role in creating a more informed, engaged, and active citizenry, which is essential for a healthy democracy.
So it's not just about personal gain, it's about contributing to the common good and creating a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. The Washington report, in particular, presented some compelling data on voter turnout,
Okay.
showing that those with higher levels of education are significantly more likely to vote in elections, particularly presidential elections. In fact, they found that in the 2004 presidential election, college graduates voted at 3 times the rate of high school dropouts.
Wow, that's a pretty stark difference. It really highlights the link between education and civic engagement.
It does. And the Pennsylvania report delved into some of the reasons behind this link, pointing to research showing that education increases individuals' knowledge of civic issues, their sense of political efficacy, and their willingness to engage in political discussions and debates.
So education helps equip individuals with the knowledge, skills, and confidence they need to participate effectively in the democratic process.
Precisely. And both reports emphasize the societal benefits of a more civically engaged population,
Right.
including increased social trust, stronger communities, and a more responsive government.
It's a reminder that education isn't just about individual advancement. It's about creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And now that we've explored the evidence behind the benefits of education, let's shift gears and delve into some of the specific policy recommendations that the reports outline for addressing the challenges facing public education.
Sounds good to me. What were some of the key takeaways there?
Well, one of the most prominent recommendations that emerged from both reports was the need for increased and more equitable funding for public schools. The Pennsylvania report, in particular, argued that the state's current funding formula is inadequate and inequitable, shortchanging students in low-income districts and perpetuating a cycle of inequality. They called for a new funding formula that takes into account factors like student poverty, English language learners, and special education needs, ensuring that resources are allocated based on need rather than zip code.
So it's about leveling the playing field and ensuring that every child has access to the resources they need to succeed, regardless of their background or where they live.
Exactly. And the Washington report echoed those sentiments, calling for significant increases in federal funding for education, particularly for early childhood education and for schools serving high concentrations of low-income students.
Right. It's about making a national commitment to investing in education as a pathway to opportunity and a more just and equitable society.
Absolutely. And in addition to funding, both reports emphasize the importance of improving teacher quality and effectiveness.
They really drove home the point that teachers are the heart of the education system,
Yeah.
and we need to do everything we can to attract, retain, and support highly effective educators.
Precisely. The Pennsylvania report suggested a multifaceted approach, including raising teacher salaries, providing high-quality training and professional development opportunities, and creating supportive working conditions where teachers feel valued and respected.
Right. It's not just about paying teachers more. It's about creating a culture that values and supports the teaching profession.
Exactly. And the Washington report echoed those ideas, proposing reforms to teacher preparation programs, greater emphasis on mentorship and support for new teachers, and more effective systems for evaluating and rewarding teacher performance.
So it's about attracting talented individuals to the profession, providing them with the tools and support they need to succeed, and then recognizing and rewarding their hard work and dedication.
Exactly. And beyond funding and teacher quality, both reports also emphasize the need to address those out-of-school factors that we were discussing earlier, the ones that can have such a profound impact on educational outcomes.
Right. It's about recognizing that education doesn't happen in isolation, and we need to address issues like poverty, healthcare access, and food insecurity if we want to create a truly equitable education system.
Exactly. The Pennsylvania report called for wraparound services that support students and families, addressing basic needs like healthcare, housing, and food security. They argued that we need to create a safety net of support for students
Right.
so they can focus on learning without having to worry about their basic needs.
It's about creating a supportive environment both inside and outside the classroom, recognizing that a child's success in school is influenced by so many factors beyond their control.
You got it. And the Washington report echoed those sentiments, proposing investments in early childhood education, affordable healthcare, and affordable housing, all of which can have a significant positive impact on educational outcomes.
So it's about taking a holistic approach, recognizing that education is interconnected with so many other aspects of our society,
Yeah,
and we need to address those underlying issues if we want to create lasting change.
I couldn't agree more. It's about creating a more just and equitable society
Yeah.
where all children have the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the broad policy recommendations, but I'm curious to hear about some of the specific research findings that the reports highlighted to support these recommendations.
Okay.
What were some of the key takeaways there?
Well, one of the things that both reports really emphasized was the importance of early childhood education as a critical investment with long-term benefits.
Okay.
The Washington report, in particular, cited a study that found that participation in high-quality pre-K programs can lead to significant gains in cognitive development,
Okay.
language skills, and social-emotional development.
Mm.
So those early interventions can have a profound impact on a child's trajectory.
Setting them up for success in school and in life.
Exactly. And the Pennsylvania report pointed to research showing that investments in early childhood education can actually generate substantial cost savings over the long term
Right.
due to things like reduced crime rates, lower healthcare costs, and higher employment rates.
So it's not just about doing the right thing for kids.
Yeah.
It's also about making a smart investment
Mm-hmm.
that benefits society as a whole.
Precisely. And in addition to early childhood education, both reports highlighted the effectiveness of programs that provide targeted support for students who are struggling academically
Right.
or who face other challenges.
So it's about recognizing that not all students learn at the same pace or in the same way,
Yeah.
and providing individualized support to help them reach their full potential.
Exactly. For example, the Pennsylvania report discussed the positive impacts of after-school programs, tutoring programs, and mentoring programs, all of which can provide students with the extra help they need to succeed.
And those types of programs can be especially beneficial for students who might not have access to those resources at home or in their community.
Exactly. And the Washington report cited research showing that early intervention programs for students with learning disabilities can significantly improve their academic outcomes and reduce their likelihood of dropping out of school.
So it's about identifying those students who are at risk and intervening early to provide them with the support they need to overcome those challenges.
Absolutely. And both reports emphasize the importance of creating a safe and supportive learning environment for all students.
That makes a lot of sense. Students can't be expected to learn and thrive if they don't feel safe and supported at school.
Right. The Pennsylvania report, in particular, highlighted the negative impact of bullying, harassment, and violence on student learning and well-being.
Yeah.
They called for schools to implement comprehensive anti-bullying policies, provide training for staff on how to identify and respond to bullying, and create a culture of respect and inclusivity.
So it's about fostering a positive school climate where everyone feels respected, valued, and safe to be themselves.
Exactly. And the Washington report addressed some of the systemic issues that can contribute to a negative school climate, particularly for students of color.
Okay.
They proposed strategies for addressing school discipline practices that disproportionately impact students of color,
Yeah.
such as reducing reliance on suspensions and expulsions and implementing restorative justice practices.
So it's about creating a more equitable and just system of discipline
Mm-hmm.
that addresses the root causes of behavior problems
Yeah.
rather than simply punishing students.
Precisely. And speaking of creating a more equitable system,
Yeah.
let's delve into the recommendations the Washington report outlined for addressing the challenges facing higher education.
That's an area I'm really curious about, especially considering the rising cost of college and the increasing burden of student loan debt. What does the report have to say about that?
Well, they started by highlighting the growing importance of higher education for economic success in the 21st century. Okay, they presented data showing that a college degree is increasingly becoming the key to unlocking good-paying jobs and achieving financial security. But at the same time, they acknowledged that the cost of college has risen dramatically in recent decades, outpacing inflation and wage growth, leaving many students with crushing debt burdens.
Right, it's a real catch-22. We need a college degree to get ahead, but the cost of getting that degree can set us back for years,
Yeah.
if not decades.
Exactly. And those costs are creating significant barriers to access, particularly for students from low-income families and students of color.
So it's not just about making college more affordable, it's about ensuring that all students have an equal opportunity to pursue higher education,
Yeah.
regardless of their financial background.
Exactly. And the Washington report offered a range of policy recommendations aimed at making college more affordable and accessible,
Right.
including increasing federal financial aid, expanding tuition assistance programs, and lowering interest rates on student loans.
So it's about reducing the financial burden of college and making it possible for more students to pursue their educational goals without taking on crippling debt.
Precisely. And in addition to affordability, the report also called for reforms to college accreditation and accountability systems.
That's an area I haven't thought much about. What are they hoping to achieve with those reforms?
Well, their argument is that these systems are often too focused on inputs rather than outcomes.
Okay.
They can be overly bureaucratic, stifling innovation, and limiting access to new and emerging fields of study. They want to see a shift towards systems that are more focused on student outcomes, such as graduation rates,
Okay.
job placement rates, and earnings potential.
So it's about ensuring that colleges are actually preparing students for success in the real world
Yeah.
and holding them accountable for achieving those outcomes.
Exactly. And it's about encouraging innovation and creating pathways for students to pursue careers in those fields that are driving economic growth and innovation in the 21st century.
It makes sense to me. And the report also highlighted the importance of investing in research and development, arguing that these investments can lead to new discoveries, technological breakthroughs, and ultimately economic growth.
That's a really crucial point. We need to ensure that our nation remains at the forefront of scientific and technological progress if we want to maintain our global leadership and create a prosperous future.
Okay, so we've explored some of the key findings and recommendations from these two reports. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the broader implications of all of this. What does it all mean for the future of education?
That's a great question. I think these reports paint a really compelling picture of education as a powerful engine for social and economic progress, essential for individual opportunity, community well-being, and national prosperity.
Yeah.
They underscore the need for a fundamental shift in how we view and value education,
Right.
recognizing its critical role in shaping a brighter future for all.
So it's not just about individual advancement. It's about investing in our collective future
Yeah.
and creating a more just, equitable, and thriving society.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that education doesn't happen in isolation.
Right.
It's interconnected with so many other aspects of our society.
Right.
And we need to address those underlying issues like poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity if we truly want to create an education system that works for everyone.
It's about creating a world where every child, regardless of their background or circumstances, has the chance to reach their full potential.
I couldn't agree more. And I think these reports offer a roadmap for how we can get there.
Okay.
They highlight the need for increased and more equitable funding,
Right.
for attracting and retaining high-quality teachers, for addressing those out-of-school factors that can impede a child's success, and for creating a culture that values and supports education at all levels.
So it's a call to action, urging policymakers, educators, parents, and all citizens to come together and make education a top priority.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that education isn't just an expense.
Right.
It's an investment, and it's one of the best investments we can make as a society.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of positive arguments for investing in education, but I'm sure there are also some criticisms and counterarguments.
Right.
What are some of those?
You're right. There are always different perspectives on complex issues like education. And it's important to consider those opposing viewpoints
Yeah.
so we can have a more balanced and informed discussion.
So what are some of those opposing viewpoints? What are some of the criticisms that people level against the idea of increased public investment in education?
Well, one common criticism is that the reports overstate the economic benefits of education,
Okay.
arguing that factors like innate ability, family background, and social connections play a more significant role in determining economic success.
Right.
Critics often point to examples of individuals with limited education who achieve great wealth and success,
Right.
while others with advanced degrees struggle financially.
So they're arguing that education isn't the guaranteed path to success that some people make it out to be.
Exactly. And to be fair, they do have a point. Education isn't a magic bullet,
Right.
and there are no guarantees of success,
Right.
regardless of how much education you have.
Right.
But I think the reports acknowledge those complexities. They're not suggesting that education is the only factor that matters, but rather that it significantly increases an individual's chances of upward mobility and economic security.
It's like giving someone a stronger hand to play in the game of life, even if they don't always win every round.
Exactly. And another criticism that's often leveled is that the focus on public investment ignores the potential of market-based solutions, such as school choice programs and charter schools.
Right. Some people argue that these programs can increase competition, improve efficiency, and provide parents with more options for their children's education.
Yes, and that's a valid point.
Right.
However, the reports also caution against the potential downsides of those approaches. They argue that these programs can sometimes exacerbate segregation, drain resources from traditional public schools, and lack sufficient accountability measures.
So it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
It seems like the best approach might involve a combination of public and private initiatives, carefully designed and implemented to ensure quality and equity.
I agree. And another potential criticism is that the reports focus too heavily on quantifiable outcomes,
Right.
like test scores, graduation rates, and employment statistics. Some people argue that this neglects the less tangible but equally important benefits of education, such as personal growth, critical thinking, and civic responsibility.
Right. Some of those valuable aspects of education can't be easily measured or reduced to numbers.
Exactly. But I think the reports do acknowledge the importance of those broader goals.
Right.
They emphasize the need for a well-rounded education that fosters creativity, critical thinking, and a sense of purpose.
It's about developing the whole person, not just preparing them for the workforce.
Absolutely. And finally, some critics might say that the reports are overly idealistic, failing to acknowledge the political realities and budgetary constraints
Right.
that often limit investments in education.
It's true that implementing the bold policy recommendations outlined in these reports would require significant political will and financial resources.
Right. And it's important to be realistic about those challenges. But I think the reports make a compelling case that these investments are essential and that failing to make them will have far greater costs in the long run.
So it's about shifting our priorities, recognizing that education is not just an expense, but an investment in our collective future.
Exactly. It's about making the tough choices today
Yeah.
to create a brighter tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears and consider some of the specific insights from these reports that might have resonated most strongly with you.
Okay.
What were some of the aha moments that stood out?
Were you surprised by any of the data or the arguments presented?
Yeah.
Did anything change your perspective on this issue?
Perhaps you were struck by the sheer magnitude of the economic and social costs associated with educational failure.
Yeah.
We're talking about lost earnings, increased crime rates, higher healthcare costs, and a whole host of other problems that can stem from a lack of education.
Or maybe you were inspired by the potential of early childhood education to transform lives and break cycles of poverty. The research on the benefits of high-quality pre-K programs is really compelling.
It is. And what about the role of teachers? Did you gain a deeper appreciation for the critical role they play and the need to attract, retain, and support highly effective educators?
Or maybe you were moved by the stories of individuals who overcame tremendous obstacles to achieve educational success, demonstrating the transformative power of education.
Whatever resonated most strongly with you, it's clear that education is an issue that deserves our attention and our commitment.
Now, let's shift gears and explore some of the practical implications of these findings for your own life and your own community.
Okay.
The report's focused on the big picture,
Yeah.
providing national and statewide data.
Right.
But how do these issues play out in your own neighborhood, your own school district, your own family?
What are the specific educational challenges and opportunities that exist in your community?
Are there funding disparities between schools in your area?
Yeah.
Are there programs or initiatives in place to support early childhood education or to provide extra help for struggling students?
Are there opportunities for you to get involved in advocating for educational equity
Right.
or supporting your local schools?
Take a moment to reflect on these questions and consider how you can apply the knowledge you've gained from these reports to make a difference in your own community.
It's about moving beyond awareness to action, translating insights into impact.
So what are some concrete steps that people can take to make a difference? What are some of the calls to action that emerged from these reports?
Well, one of the most urgent calls to action is to advocate for increased and more equitable funding for public education.
And how can people do that?
There are a few things people can do.
Okay.
First, they can contact their elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels to express their support for policies that prioritize education funding. They can write letters, make phone calls, attend town hall meetings, and generally make their voices heard.
So it's about being an informed and engaged citizen and letting our elected officials know that education is a priority for us.
Exactly. And it's not just about contacting your representatives.
Yep.
It's also about engaging in public discourse,
Right.
raising awareness about the importance of education and the need for adequate resources.
Right.
Talk to your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues about these issues. Share the information you've learned from these reports.
Right. It's about educating others and building a groundswell of support for education.
Exactly. And another call to action is to support efforts to improve teacher quality and effectiveness.
That's crucial. What are some ways that people can do that?
Well, one way is to advocate for higher teacher salaries, better training and professional development opportunities, and more supportive working conditions for educators.
Okay.
Again, this can involve contacting your elected officials
Right.
and raising awareness about the importance of investing in our teachers.
Right. It's about making sure that we're attracting and retaining talented individuals to the teaching profession and providing them with the resources and support they need to succeed.
Exactly. And it's not just about advocating for policy changes, it's also about supporting teachers directly.
Okay.
You can mentor aspiring teachers,
Right.
volunteer in your local schools, or donate to organizations that support teacher development.
So there are lots of different ways to get involved and make a difference in the lives of teachers and students.
Absolutely. And another important call to action is to address those out-of-school factors that can impact educational outcomes.
Right. We were talking earlier about things like poverty, lack of access to health care, and unstable housing.
Yes.
Those are huge issues that can create significant barriers to learning.
Exactly. And while these issues might seem outside the scope of education policy, they're actually inextricably linked.
Right.
We can't expect students to succeed in school if their basic needs aren't being met.
So what can people do to address these broader social issues?
Well, they can support programs that provide wraparound services for students and families, such as healthcare, housing, and food assistance. They can also advocate for policies that promote economic opportunity,
Right.
reduce poverty, and create safer and healthier communities.
It's about understanding that investing in children and families is an investment in our collective future.
Absolutely. And it's about working together to create a more just and equitable society where all children have the chance to thrive, regardless of their background or circumstances.
And both reports seem to emphasize the importance of civic engagement around education issues.
Yes. They really stress that education shouldn't be viewed as just a personal issue, it's a public issue. And that means we all have a role to play in advocating for the kind of education system we want to see.
So what does that look like in practice? What are some ways people can get involved?
Well, they can attend school board meetings, participate in community forums,
Right.
and vote for candidates who support education. They can also get involved in local organizations that are working to improve education in their communities.
It's about making your voice heard, holding our elected officials accountable, and working together to create a system that benefits all students.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, I'm curious to get your thoughts on some of the future trends and challenges that are likely to shape the landscape of education in the coming years.
Well, one thing that both reports touched on is the rapid pace of technological advancement and how that's transforming the way we learn.
Yes. The rise of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and other emerging technologies is creating incredible new opportunities in education.
Right.
But it's also raising some big questions about how we adapt our teaching practices and prepare students for a future where technology will play an increasingly central role.
Right. It's about finding the right balance between embracing those new technologies
Yeah.
and preserving those essential human elements of teaching and learning.
Exactly. And we also need to consider the growing diversity of the student population. Schools are becoming increasingly multicultural and multilingual,
Right.
reflecting the changing demographics of our nation.
Yes, that's a beautiful thing.
Right.
But it also presents challenges for educators who need to adapt their teaching methods and create inclusive learning environments where all students feel valued and respected.
Absolutely. It's about celebrating those differences and creating a space where every student feels a sense of belonging and can thrive. And of course, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the rising cost of college and the increasing burden of student loan debt.
That's a huge issue. It's pricing many students out of higher education and creating a generation saddled with debt.
It is a major challenge. We need to find ways to make college more affordable and accessible while also ensuring that higher education remains relevant and prepares students for success in a rapidly changing economy.
Right. It's not just about making college cheaper. It's about making sure it's worth the investment.
Exactly. And it's about creating more diverse pathways to success.
Right.
Recognizing that a four-year college degree isn't the only route to a fulfilling and well-paying career.
Absolutely. We need to value and support those alternative pathways like vocational training and apprenticeships
Right.
that can lead to good-paying jobs in high-demand fields.
You're right on the mark. And finally, I think it's important to acknowledge the growing political divide around education,
Yeah.
with debates about curriculum, funding, and the role of government becoming increasingly polarized.
Yes, I've noticed that too. It seems like it's getting harder to have a constructive conversation about education without it devolving into a partisan battle.
It's a real challenge, and it makes it more difficult to build consensus around solutions that benefit all students.
We need to find ways to bridge those divides and to create a more collaborative and constructive approach to addressing the challenges facing education.
I completely agree. We need to remember that education isn't a partisan issue. It's a human issue. It's about investing in our children, our communities, and our future.
Well said. So, despite these challenges, there are also a lot of exciting innovations and potential solutions emerging in the field of education. What are some of the things that give you hope for the future?
One thing that's really exciting is the development of personalized learning approaches that are tailored to the individual needs and interests of each student. Technology is playing a big role here,
Okay.
with adaptive learning platforms that can provide customized instruction, feedback, and support. It's about moving away from a one-size-fits-all model of education
Right.
and recognizing that students learn in different ways and at different paces.
I love that idea. It's about empowering every student to reach their full potential by creating a learning experience that's designed specifically for them.
Exactly. And another area that's really promising is the growing focus on project-based learning, which involves engaging students in real-world challenges
Okay.
and problem-solving activities.
It's a much more hands-on and engaging approach than traditional lecture-based learning.
Absolutely. And it helps students develop those critical 21st century skills like critical thinking,
Right.
collaboration, creativity, and communication.
Right. And then there's competency-based education,
Hmm.
which is gaining traction as well. That approach focuses on demonstrating mastery of specific skills and knowledge rather than simply accumulating credit hours.
Yes, it's a much more outcomes-oriented approach, ensuring that students are graduating with the skills and knowledge they need to succeed, regardless of their chosen career path.
I like that. It's about focusing on what students are actually learning and able to do,
Hmm.
not just how much time they spend sitting in a classroom.
Precisely. And finally, I think there's a growing recognition of the importance of social-emotional learning, which involves developing students' self-awareness, empathy, and interpersonal skills.
That's so important. It's about teaching kids how to manage their emotions, build healthy relationships, and make responsible decisions.
Right. And it's essential for creating a positive and supportive learning environment,
Right.
as well as preparing students for success in life beyond the classroom.
So despite all the challenges, it sounds like there's a lot to be hopeful about in the field of education.
Absolutely. There are so many talented and dedicated educators, researchers, and innovators out there who are working to create a better future for our children.
Yeah.
And we as citizens have a responsibility to support their efforts
Right.
and to advocate for policies that prioritize education.
Okay, before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on one more area. The ethical considerations that are becoming increasingly relevant in the context of education.
Okay.
What are some of the ethical dilemmas that educators and policymakers are grappling with these days?
That's a great question. One of the key ethical issues is the use of technology and data in education, particularly with the rise of artificial intelligence and big data.
Right. We need to ensure that these technologies are being used responsibly and ethically to enhance learning, not to exploit or manipulate students.
Absolutely. We need to protect student privacy, avoid bias and discrimination in algorithms, and ensure that these technologies are being used to benefit all students, not just a select few.
That makes sense. And I know standardized testing is a controversial issue, raising ethical questions about whether it's a fair and accurate way to measure student learning and school performance.
It's a complex issue for sure. On the one hand, we need some way to assess student progress and hold schools accountable for results.
Right.
But we also need to be mindful of the potential negative consequences of overemphasizing standardized tests, like
Right.
narrowing the curriculum, teaching to the test, and creating undue stress for students and teachers.
It's about finding the right balance and ensuring that our assessment methods are aligned with our broader goals for education.
Exactly. And we can't ignore the ethical implications of growing inequality in education, both within and between countries.
Right. We need to ensure that all children, regardless of their background or circumstances, have access to a quality education. It's a matter of social justice and human rights.
Absolutely. It's about creating a more just and equitable world where education is seen as a fundamental human right, not a privilege for the few.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the research on public investment in education, I'm struck by the sheer complexity of this issue.
It is complex, but it's also incredibly important. Education has the power to transform lives, communities, and entire nations.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so crucial that we have these conversations, that we engage with the research, and that we advocate for policies that support a high-quality, equitable education system for all.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
We've explored the benefits of investing in education, the challenges facing the system,
Mm-hmm.
the potential solutions and innovations that are emerging, and the ethical considerations that we need to be mindful of.
We have. It's been a really thought-provoking and informative discussion.
Now, I'd like to leave our listener with a final thought. We've talked a lot about the big picture, but ultimately, change happens at the local level.
Yeah.
It happens in our own communities, in our own schools, and in our own homes.
That's right. So I encourage you to take what you've learned from this deep dive and apply it to your own life.
Right.
What can you do to support education in your community?
Yeah.
How can you advocate for policies that prioritize education? How can you help create a world where every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential?
These are big questions, but they're questions that each of us needs to wrestle with. The future of education depends on all of us.
It does. And I have a feeling that after this deep dive, you're well equipped to be a part of that future, to be an advocate for change, and to help create a world where every child has the chance to thrive.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. I hope this has been informative and inspiring for our listener.